Hello guys, and Hari here. So welcome to part 2 of my how to get your memo subX series, and here I'm going to be covering how to get sub 1 for those of you who are currently around a minute to a minute 30. And secondly, I apologize for the delay in making this video because I was really preoccupied with some other work of late, and I also got a new camera, by the way. This is the PowerShot SX60. So yeah, I think I shouldn't be deviating so much, so I'll just get right into it. So I've just again made my usual list of things for getting faster. First one, reducing revisions. So I'll just touch upon that real quick. Well, there's not too much to say apart from just revising less, because when you're like a minute 30 plus, more than a minute 30, you're probably going to be revising at least maybe say 2-3 times for each piece type, that is corners and edges. And if you want to get like sub 1, that is if you're around 1 minute to a minute 30, then you should probably work on making your images quicker and also revising those less. And also you might want to work on, like, whichever piece you're putting in your short term, you might want to just do it in one go. Some of you who do edges in audio that is short term, you might still find this difficult, but keep trying. But for this stage, I don't think there should be much of a problem for you guys to just audio your corners in just one loop without having to keep going back and revising. So that's not too much to say about reducing revisions. Now we move on to making fewer memo mistakes. Now this is something important because initially when you're a beginner, probably I'll just do a scramble real quick. Doesn't have to be a scramble. Yeah, suppose this is my orientation, white top, green front, and I see the orange, blue, yellow. Initially, you might, like when you're memoing and you're trying to keep track of your memo, you might memo it like blue, orange, yellow, or yellow, blue, orange. Some things happen like that when you try and memo fast, or when you have a lot of things to keep track of. I mean, it might sound silly right now, but in an actual solve, it's something that's possible. So for me, orange, blue, yellow is H. So instead of H, you might memo it as S or X by mistake, something like that. So cut down on those mistakes. Right now, I can say that probably I'm around 99% of my solves, I don't make memo mistakes like that. On big blind and multi-blind, I still make some mistakes because of the vast amount of information you have to keep track of. But on 3 blind, really minimize memo mistakes, because if you realize a mistake, good, but it's still going to eat into your time a lot, and if you don't realize it, well, DNF. So that's not good, so cut down on that. And then you got a smooth audio loop. That's exactly what I told you. Whichever piece you do in short-term memorization, whether it be corners or edges, try and just do it in one loop. Right now, edges is what I do in audio, and I can pretty much do it in, I don't revise basically anymore, but if you're still trying to get sub 1, obviously you are going to be revising still. But if you're doing corners last, then just don't revise it, or try not to if you're doing it right now. And for edges, you may still do a mini revision. And when I say something like mini revision, like suppose I'm just taking the scramble, I have this is edges, obviously using M2, HOGPMN. So HOGPMN, you might just do a little like audio that I don't know, it's just embarrassing if I just try and audio all that, but anyway, just keep track of that. Might want to revise it a little bit. Then you go to C, E, F, W, Kefwa, and that's it, because this piece is solved. So do like a mini revision, like don't try and revise for the first 6, and then the last 4, just make sure you got them, and then just don't revise the entire thing, but just revise maybe the first 6 if you're not remembering them, or the last 4 if you forgot that because of remembering the first 6. So try revising in subsets, that's what I'm trying to say, instead of revising the entire thing from front to finish. Okay, so next is individual piece identification. So this Noah touches upon in his video, and it's fairly simple. You just like try and just dismantle a cube, and okay, that was embarrassing. You just dismantle a cube and just try and identify the pieces individually, so, or stickers without reference or help from the centers. So this is my buffer obviously, so I'm not gonna take that. Okay, so you should know that blue white is Q and white blue is A, something like that, or whatever your lettering scheme is, or N color scheme obviously. So I have N, Q, and B. So you should not be like having too much pauses just because you're thinking of which letter it is in your scheme. Of course, for those of you still not sub 1 yet, you may have some pauses, but this might help you in eradicating those. Moving on, we have faster execution. I think I touched upon this in my previous video where I said that if you execute faster, you're gonna memo faster because you have to remember what you memorized for a lesser period of time. So switch to M2. This might be a good piece of advice for those of you still using OP edges and corners right now, so switch to M2 for edges. And time attacks, what I mean by time attacks is for those of you right now who still spend time thinking about setup moves for a target, that should not be the case, because if you're spending time thinking about that, you're more liable to, you're more prone to forgetting your memorization. So each target should be pretty automatic. I'll just solve this real quick. So you should not be spending time thinking like, okay, so I have S in my letter scheme, so what setup moves do I need to do for S, and so on and so forth. Okay, just bear with me, I'm a really slow speed solver, and looking through the camera and solving isn't my best thing. Yeah, so almost done. Which pawn is this? G, right. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so the point I was trying to make was, suppose I have I, you should not be thinking, okay, I is here and then what do I have to do for I, or suppose for corners you have L, you should just know it's D, Y prim, undo that, and for T it's D prime, undo that. So basically get your setup moves down pat and stop thinking about your execution, because if your execution falls into place, so will your memo. Time attacks, it's just a good way of practicing your execution in the sense that getting your setup moves down. So for M2 time attack, you may want to do like all the edge targets in one go, just like a PLL attack. And for corners, I've never really done this, but I've heard some people do it and it might help you out, so just try it out if you want to, but personally I haven't done this. Might be good though. Capped memo time, that is, if you're trying to get sub 1, try pushing your memo so that you memo in sub 1. You may forget, or rather you will forget your memo quite often when you do this. Like suppose you're memorizing in 1 minute 15, try pushing it to say a minute, maybe 55 seconds. And the best way to do that is just memorize till you see 55 seconds or 1 minute pop up on your screen, and then just wear the blindfold. Even if you've not finished the memorization, just wear the blindfold and execute whatever you've memorized till. So suppose you execute 80%, that is, suppose you memorized 80% and you execute all of it correctly, that means you're like 80% there of getting to 55-second memo. So you'll gradually improve at this and hopefully you should get sub 1. In fact, even I can use this, and many fast people, even Ollie, he said that it helped him in getting sub 10 memo. So this tip is like universal, anybody can use it and get better with it. Next is vivid images and mentally tracking targets. So vivid images, the name pretty much gives it away. So if you're doing like images for corners, you might want to just make the images really vivid and not revise corners at all, because you're going to be having a long edges audio loop. Okay, it's not that long, but at this stage it may seem so. And if you're doing images for edges, then you may be tempted to revise, but just try and make it like pretty strong so that you don't have to come back and revise too much, and because that'll really cost you time if you're doing images for edges. And we have mentally tracking targets. So what this means is, like in my previous video I told you, like if you're a beginner you can just put your fingers on pieces to memorize, and this will make it easy for you. But if you're trying to get faster, that's not really a good piece of advice. So just try and just wean off from that habit. So just try and just keep track of it all mentally. It might be like a bit cumbersome initially, but it's gonna really help you out in the end, and soon you'll just be doing this subconsciously without having any mental effort or exertion. You can just focus fully on your memo and know that there's some flipped edge somewhere because the edges or corners doesn't tally up. I mean, I know that most of you guys know this the formula, like number of targets minus the number of cycle breaks plus 1 is the number of pieces solved. So you might be doing this kind of math right now, but it should become really intuitive as you go along and get faster. So that's mentally tracking targets. And finally, we have edges only or corners only solves, and this is not really gonna help you get faster as such, in my opinion at least, because in my opinion, if you overload your memorization, that is either by making it faster than it is currently, that is by rushing memo, or by doing more cubes or bigger cubes like multi-blind or 4-blind, 5-blind, this is actually going to help your 3-blind memo a lot, because once you can store that much amount of information, 3-blind is nothing. It's just really short term. It's not difficult at all. So I'd recommend doing big blind, multi-blind. It might help your memorization for 3-blind. You can store more in short term. And the reason why I've included edges only and corners only is if you're memorizing in say 10 seconds for a corners only solve and you're taking 20 seconds for an edges only solve, try getting your total cube memorization down to 10 plus 20, 30 seconds. It's not going to happen, and it's not going to happen initially, but it's such that your memo loop should be pretty smooth, as in like not pause too much anywhere. Generally, the more people have to memorize, the more they pause, and pause as in revise, I should say, not pause. But when you have like say a 10 cube multi, for example, it's obviously slower than memorizing 10 3x3s individually. So you get the point. But for 3-blind, a good goal, you won't achieve it right now, but a good goal is to have your total memorization time equal to the individual memo times of your corners only and edges only. And right now I can say my total memo time, which is sub 15, is probably more or less this time I take for corners only plus edges only. Maybe it's around 1 to 2 seconds slower. So at this stage you probably won't achieve that, but just try for that. It's a good goal to go for. And apart from that, I can just tell you to practice, because the more you practice, obviously the more you're going to be familiar with your lettering scheme. Even till I got down to about 30 seconds memo, I was still having trouble with my corners like K, P, stuff like that. Like I would be confused on which side the sticker is, because corners have 3 stickers, you know. So I'd be confused about that and which letter it corresponds to. So that can just be eliminated with practice, and maybe just with doing stuff like this, disassemble and just identify each piece individually. So I think that's all I have to say for this. Getting sub 1 isn't really that difficult. I just did brute force practice and it got me there. But if you want to work the smart way and not just do solve after solve, then this might help you. So if it did help you, or if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, of course. And I'll not be making the future parts of this series as I initially did say, because of my busy schedule. Instead, Kapiano is going to be taking over from now. So I hope you enjoy his videos, and wish him best of luck in making those. So thanks guys for watching. Take care.